Hello, my name is Keith Thomson. When we're talking about the heroes of the faith, we're not talking about some class of super Christians, people who maybe were so filled with the Holy Spirit they could do these miraculous acts. No, we're talking about normal, everyday people, Christians who believed in Jesus Christ and lived faithful life. We're going to be looking today at Mary, the sister of Lazarus, who is a tremendous example of just what we're talking about. You see, whenever Jesus went to Jerusalem, he didn't stay in the city overnight. But come evening time, he would cross the brook Kidron, climb the Mount of Olives, and enter the village of Bethany. And there he would stay at Mary, Lazarus, and their sisters Martha's house. Notice when we read of his first meeting of this family, it's found in Luke chapter 10, and we're going to be reading 38 to 42. Now, as they were traveling along, he entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister called Mary, who was seated at the Lord's feet, listening to his words. But Martha was distracted with all the preparations, and she came to him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the serving alone? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered and said to her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and bothered about so many things, but only one thing is necessary. For Mary has chosen the good part, which shall not be taken away from her." Right away in this first passage about this family, we can see the character of Mary. While Martha was distracted, Mary was sitting at the Lord's feet, listening to his words, taking in that spiritual food which Jesus gives all of us. We're reminded of the passage in 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 2, where it says, "Like newborn babes, long for the pure milk of the word, so that by it you may grow in respect to salvation." Mary had chosen the good part, and she realized that the most important thing was to serve God and feed on his word. We go on and we see in John chapter 12 of this family once again. And when Jesus once again comes into their household, this is the week that Jesus is crucified. Notice in John chapter 12, verses 1 to 3. Jesus, therefore, 6 days before the Passover, came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. So they made him a supper there, and Martha was serving. But Lazarus was one of those reclining at the table with him. Mary then took a pound of very costly perfume of pure nard, and anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Judas Iscariot then jumped up and said, "Why this waste? This perfume could be sold for a huge amount of money, and the money given to the poor." John tells us he said this not because he was worried about the poor, but Lazarus was a thief and wanted to steal the money. But no, Jesus said, "No, what Mary has done is a good thing, because she has anointed my body for my burial." And just a few days later, Jesus was crucified and he was buried. But let's focus in on Mary. We see in Mary a servant's heart. Once again, she chose the right path, and she put her service to God and his son Jesus Christ first. And that's a lesson to us. We need to have servants' hearts, and we need to put our service to God first. Just later on in that same week, we read when Jesus, on the night that he was betrayed, went to the upper room where they had the Passover feast, and he washed the disciples' feet. Notice when we pick up the story in verse 12. So John 13, verse 12 through 15. So when he washed their feet and had taken up his garments and had reclined at the table again, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, the Lord and the teacher, wash your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I gave you an example that you should do just as I did to you." Now, Jesus isn't saying that we have to ceremoniously wash one another's feet, but we have to be like Mary, be willing to serve one another in whatever way is suitable, as Jesus came to be a servant. So we need to follow his example and live our lives as servants to God, to Jesus, and to others here on earth. And if we do that, we will be following the example of Mary, and we too can be considered heroes of the faith.